The first person to congratulate me on losing everything was my own mother. She wrapped her arms around me outside the courthouse and whispered, "I'm sorry your life ended this way." I just stood there, confused, heart racing, because I had never been inside that courthouse before. I had no idea what she was talking about. Before I could ask, my uncle walked over, shook his head, and muttered, "One stupid mistake ruined your future." Relatives stared. Some looked disappointed. Others looked embarrassed. Nobody asked me a single question. Nobody wanted my side of the story. They had already decided I was guilty. The strange part? They weren't talking about me. They were talking about my identical twin sister. If you've never had an identical twin, it's difficult to explain what it feels like. People don't just confuse your face. Sometimes they confuse your entire life. My name is Aria Bennett. I was 19 years old when one misunderstanding almost destroyed everything I had spent years building. Not because I made a bad decision, but because someone who looked exactly like me did. My twin sister's name was Elise Bennett. We shared the same birthday, the same freckles, the same green eyes, the same smile. Even our voices sounded almost identical over the phone. But that's where the similarities ended. I believed every choice had consequences. Elise believed every consequence had a way out. She loved excitement. I loved stability. She hated schedules. I planned every hour of my day. People always said we were like two strangers trapped inside identical faces. And honestly, they weren't wrong. I was studying architecture at Westbrook University on a full academic scholarship. Losing that scholarship wasn't an option. Without it, college would simply be impossible. Every evening after class, I worked at a local bookstore. The pay wasn't amazing, but I loved the quiet atmosphere. Old books, fresh coffee, people who still believed stories mattered. Most nights, I'd stay after closing just to finish assignments before walking home. It wasn't glamorous, but it was the life I had chosen. Elise couldn't understand it. "You work too hard," she often said. "You worry too much." "And you don't worry enough," I'd reply. She'd laugh, then disappear with another group of friends. Sometimes I didn't hear from her for days. That wasn't unusual. She had always lived life like tomorrow would never come. Then one Friday evening, everything changed. I was closing the bookstore when my phone started vibrating. 5 missed calls, 3 messages from my mother, 2 from Dad, 7 from relatives I rarely spoke to. My stomach tightened. Something had happened. I called Mom immediately. She answered before the first ring finished. "Aria." Her voice sounded shaky. "Where are you?" "At work." There was silence. Then she whispered, "No, don't lie to me." I frowned. "I'm serious. I'm at the bookstore." She didn't answer. Instead, she ended the call. 30 seconds later, my manager walked toward me holding his phone. His expression looked strange, concerned. "Aria, I think you should see this." He handed me the phone. A local news channel filled the screen. Across the bottom ran a headline in bold red letters. "University, student arrested after exam, fraud investigation." My heart stopped. Then the camera zoomed in. The girl being escorted into a police car looked exactly like me. Exactly. Same hair, same jacket, same face. Customers inside the bookstore slowly turned toward me. One woman covered her mouth. A man quietly whispered, "Isn't that her?" Another customer looked from the television, then back at me. I suddenly understood why everyone had been calling, why my mother thought I was lying, why my relatives believed my future was over. They had seen the news, and they thought the girl in handcuffs was me, but it wasn't. It was Elise, and at that moment, I had absolutely no idea how much damage one mistaken identity was about to cause. For the first time in my life, I was afraid to leave the bookstore, not because I had done something wrong, because everyone believed I had. The television behind the counter replayed the same footage every few minutes. The reporter kept repeating the headline: Westbrook University, student arrested in connection with an examination fraud investigation. Every time the camera showed my twin sister's face, I watched another customer glance toward me. My manager quietly turned off the television. "I'm sorry, Aria." I forced a smile. "It wasn't me." "I know." His answer surprised me. "You do?" He nodded. "You've worked here for almost 2 years. I know exactly who you are." Those simple words nearly made me cry. After an hour of being judged by strangers, one person had chosen to trust me. I thanked him before leaving. Outside, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Social media was exploding. Some people were sending hateful messages. Others were asking if the news was true. Several classmates had already shared screenshots of the video. Nobody was asking questions. Everyone already had an opinion. When I reached home, both of my parents were waiting in the living room. Neither of them looked angry anymore. They looked confused. Mom stood up first. "Where were you?" "I told you. I was working." Dad looked at me carefully. "Show me." "What?" "Your employee time log." Normally, I would have been offended. Instead, I quietly opened the bookstore's scheduling app. It showed exactly when I clocked in that morning, 9:13. It also showed that I hadn't left the building once. Dad stared at the screen for several seconds. Mom slowly sat back down. "So, it really wasn't you." Before anyone could say another word, the front door opened. Elise walked inside. She looked completely exhausted. Her makeup had washed away from crying. She still wore the same jacket from the news report. The entire room froze. Dad slowly stood. "You?" Elise nodded. "It was me." No excuses, no lies, just 4 painful words. "I'm so sorry." Mom burst into tears. Dad turned away without saying anything. I simply stared at my sister. She looked nothing like the confident girl who always laughed her way through life. She looked broken. "I never cheated," she whispered. Dad finally looked back at her. "Then why were you arrested?" Elise wiped her eyes. "I wasn't cheating. I was trying to stop someone else." Nobody understood, including me. She took a deep breath. "A student offered me money to hide answer sheets before the exam. I refused." "So why were you arrested?" I asked. "Because when campus security arrived, they found the answer sheets inside my backpack." The room fell silent. "I didn't put them there." "I swear." Dad frowned. "Then who did?" "I don't know. I panicked. I ran." And running made me look guilty. Suddenly everything started making sense. The headlines, the arrest, the public humiliation. People had assumed the worst before hearing the full story, just like our family had assumed it was me. 3 days later, Westbrook University announced an internal investigation. Until it was completed, Elise was suspended. Unfortunately, the internet didn't care about investigations. To everyone online, she was already guilty. And because we looked identical, I was guilty too. Monday morning, I walked across campus toward my architecture class. Conversations stopped as I passed. A group of students whispered. Someone quietly laughed. Another person muttered, "I can't believe they let her come back." I wanted to explain. I wanted to scream. But I knew it wouldn't matter. People believe what they see, not always what is true. That afternoon, I received an email from the university. The subject line made my heart race. "Urgent scholarship review meeting. My hands immediately started shaking. No, my scholarship had nothing to do with Elise. Or at least, it shouldn't have. Yet somehow, I had a terrible feeling that my twin sister's nightmare was about to become mine too. The scholarship committee meeting lasted less than 15 minutes. But those 15 minutes felt longer than the previous 19 years of my life. 3 professors sat across from me. None of them smiled. The dean folded his hands. "Miss Bennett, before we begin, we'd like to make one thing clear." I nodded. "We understand you weren't the student arrested." For the first time that week, I felt relieved. Then he continued, "However, the public confusion surrounding the incident has raised concerns." My heart sank again. Concerns. That word suddenly seemed to follow me everywhere. One professor adjusted her glasses. "Your scholarship is based not only on academic performance, but also on representing the university." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So I'm being judged because people confused me with my sister." The room became quiet. No one answered immediately. Finally, the dean sighed. "We're not making a decision today. We're simply reviewing the situation." Those words offered little comfort. When I walked out of the meeting room, I felt exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. For the first time, I understood something painful. Sometimes the truth isn't enough. Sometimes you have to wait for people to believe it. That evening, I found Elise sitting alone on the back porch. She hadn't left the house in 4 days. The confident girl who once laughed louder than anyone else barely looked up when I sat beside her. "I ruined everything." Her voice was almost a whisper. I looked toward the backyard. "No, you made mistakes. That's different." She shook her head. "I ruined your life." I didn't answer, because part of me still wondered if she was right. After several minutes of silence, she reached into her pocket. "I found something." She handed me a small flash drive. "What's this?" "The restaurant across from the exam building." I frowned. "What about it?" "My friend works there." He remembered seeing someone following me that morning. I looked at the flash drive. The restaurant has outdoor security cameras. For the first time in days, hope returned. The next morning, we drove to the restaurant together. The manager recognized Elise immediately. His expression softened. My employee told me what happened. "I'm sorry." He escorted us into his office. Within minutes, security footage appeared on the screen. The camera overlooked part of the university entrance. Students walked in every direction. Then, at exactly 8:17 a.m., the footage showed Elise walking toward campus. A young man wearing a black hoodie bumped into her, hard enough to make her drop her backpack. Several students helped gather her books. The entire interaction lasted less than 20 seconds. Then everyone walked away. Elise suddenly leaned forward. "Pause it." The manager froze the video. One student was kneeling beside her backpack. His hand disappeared inside it for just a second. Then he stood up smiling. My heartbeat became louder. "Play it again." We watched the same moment 5 more times. Each time it became clearer. Someone had placed something inside Elise's backpack. Neither of us spoke. Finally, the manager turned toward us. "I think you should take this to the university." Within an hour, we were sitting inside the dean's office. The university's legal advisor watched the footage twice, then 3 times. Nobody said anything. Finally, the advisor looked at the dean. "I recommend reopening the investigation immediately." The dean slowly nodded. "So do I." Elise closed her eyes. For the first time since her arrest, she looked like she could finally breathe. 3 days later, campus security identified the student wearing the black hoodie. His name was Noah Carter. He wasn't working alone. Investigators discovered a small group had been selling stolen exam papers for months. When Elise refused to participate, they needed someone to take the blame. She had been the easiest target. Everything changed after that. The university publicly cleared Elise of all accusations. The suspension was removed. The local news station aired a correction. Even the original viral story was updated. But something unexpected happened next. The university president personally called my phone. "Aria, we owe you an apology." I smiled quietly. "Thank you." "Actually," he continued, "we'd like to discuss something important." "What is it?" "Someone from one of our partner companies has been following this case." I frowned. "What do you mean?" They were impressed. "Not by the misunderstanding, but by the way you handled it." I looked out the window, completely confused. "Who?" The president smiled. "I think he'd rather tell you himself." Then he said a name that made my entire body freeze. Michael Harrington, the founder and CEO of one of the largest architectural firms in the country, wanted to meet me personally. For the next 48 hours, I kept wondering why someone like Michael Harrington wanted to meet me. He wasn't just a successful architect. He was the founder of Harrington Urban Design, a company that had designed airports, museums, hospitals, and entire city districts across the country. Students spent years hoping to land an internship there. I wasn't even sure I belonged in the same room. Still, the meeting was scheduled for Tuesday morning, so I went. The headquarters overlooked the city's riverfront. 40 floors of glass reflected the morning sunlight. Inside, everything felt calm, professional, nothing like the chaos that had filled my life over the past month. A receptionist greeted me warmly. "Miss Bennett." "Yes, Mr. Harrington is expecting you." She led me to the executive floor. Every step made me more nervous. When the office doors opened, I expected a room full of executives. Instead, there was only one person. Michael Harrington stood beside a table covered with architectural models. He smiled. "So you're Aria?" I nodded. "Yes, sir." He shook my hand. "I've been looking forward to meeting you." Those words immediately caught me off guard. Looking forward? He had never even met me before. He invited me to sit. Then, instead of talking about my grades, he placed a newspaper on the desk. The headlines showed the story about my twin sister. "I suppose you've seen this enough already." I smiled awkwardly, more times than I'd like. He closed the newspaper. "I'm not interested in headlines. I'm interested in people." For nearly an hour he asked me questions, not about the scandal, about my designs, my goals, the buildings I admired, how I approached difficult problems, why I chose architecture. It didn't feel like an interview. It felt like a conversation. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "Do you know why I asked you to come here?" I shook my head. "I've wondered that since the university called." He smiled. "Good. Because almost everyone assumes it was because of your portfolio." It wasn't. I frowned. "Then why?" He folded his hands. 3 weeks ago, my company offered internships to 12 students. I nodded. "One of my directors suggested removing your application." My heart dropped. "Because of the news?" He nodded. "Exactly." I looked down. "I understand." "No," he interrupted gently. "You don't." He opened another folder. Inside were emails exchanged between the university and his recruitment team. One message stood out. The student involved was not Aria Bennett. The situation is still under investigation. He looked at me. Most people stopped reading after the headline. My team kept reading. Then he smiled. "You know what impressed me?" I waited quietly. "You never attacked your sister." You never tried to become famous by telling your side first. You simply kept living with integrity while everyone else rushed to judge. His words left me speechless. He continued, "Technical skills can be taught. Character can't." Then he slid a blue folder across the desk. Inside was an offer letter, a fully funded summer internship, a personal mentor, a scholarship grant, and a guaranteed graduate position if I successfully completed the program. I looked up in disbelief. I don't even know what to say. Michael laughed softly. "Say, you'll work hard." "I will. I promise." He smiled and extended his hand once more. "Welcome to Harrington Urban Design." That evening I returned home. The atmosphere inside the house felt completely different. Mom was cooking dinner. Dad sat quietly at the kitchen table. Elise looked healthier than she had in weeks. When I placed the offer letter on the table, nobody spoke. Dad slowly picked it up. He read every page. Then he read it again. Finally, he looked at me. "I spent weeks believing you had thrown your future away." His voice cracked. "But while I was judging you, you were building one." For the first time in my life, my father stood up, walked around the table, and hugged me, not because I had become successful, but because he finally understood who I had always been. A few days later, the university officially cleared Elise's name. The students responsible for the exam fraud were expelled and later charged. Life slowly returned to normal. Months later, people still ask me what it felt like to be mistaken for someone else. I always gave the same answer. Being mistaken for my twin nearly cost me my future. But it also taught me something I'll never forget. The people who truly matter will always wait to hear your story before deciding who you are. Everyone else was never worth convincing in the first place.